Welcome to Beyond Just Business, the podcast for those who want more. More clarity, more direction, and potentially more meaning. We explore the thinking behind success, the habits that shape performance, and the questions that go deeper than profit margins. If you're ready to challenge the obvious and rethink the way life and business work, you are absolutely in the right place. So to kick us off today, we've had a great insight into a variety of topics. And again, we're not going to do anything normal. We're going to think outside the box, to use a classically corporate phrase. But today we're going to talk about the stories we tell ourselves. And I think one of the interesting things about this particular topic is we all have an idea in our minds as to why we either do certain things or why we've become someone or haven't become someone. And I think we talked about it off camera, Paul, that I think you'll meet anyone any day of the week that will have a particular story that resonates with them. For some, it's the fuel that fires them, and for others, it's the anchor that weighs them down. So when it comes to the stories we tell ourselves, and in your line of work, what is it you see play out time and again when people discuss maybe the factors that have led them to where they are or the roadblocks that have stopped them fulfilling their ambition?
I think the ones that actually, just as I'm thinking about it, the people that move forward an awful lot quicker and achieve an awful lot more success, actually, they tend not to recall their stories. It's just as you're talking, I'm trying to go through all the different clients that I've come across and all the different people that I've come across. And the ones that are successful actually don't spend much time in actually reflecting over the past and reflecting over their stories. Whereas the ones that move really, really slow are actually caught up in their story. And so again, for listeners, it's more around correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Andrew. It's more around so sometimes we can keep repeating the story as regards, the childhood that we had or the trauma that we've come across or somebody that has hurt us and we have resentment, and we keep repeating that story, as not we, but the vast majority of people tend to. And they're the ones that I actually find move an awful lot slower because there's so much living in the past. That's just my understanding of it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. One of the great things about our conversations is I tend to kind of leave you out in the cold by asking one sentence, and I could lead you down a blind alley. But I think part of the reasoning behind the story is that one person's going to listen or watch this and say, okay, well, I have a story, and I remember a teacher who was in X school in XYZ, and they were mean to me. And they are the very person that made me realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I'm successful now. And if you asked me at a This Is Your Life event with, Michael Parkinson, RIP, they'd look at it and say, well, that was that particular teacher. That was the impetus for me to change my life. And you could perceive that. And again, it's perception as being a positive thing. But it's interesting that you say the ones who are successful or the ones who move fast aren't bogged down in the past. So does that mean that they gloss over it, or that they strategically maybe say, okay, it served a purpose, it was for a period of time, but the past is the past?
I think it's actually the latter. So exactly what you said there in terms of they have a trigger moment and they say, oh my God, okay, so this is something happens and they've made the decision in that moment or reflecting on that particular moment, and then they move forward from that. So they use it as a springboard, but
Right.
they're not constantly repeating their stories. If you're to ask them at an interview or review of your life or biography or whatever it may be, they will be able to recall, yeah, on this particular moment, this person told me something, or I had an event or trauma or whatever it might be. And so they actually don't tend to refer to it as being a trauma, but they refer to an event that happened in their life. And that was the catalyst for springboarding them forward to do what they were to do, and hence the reason why they became successful, versus the ones that constantly repeat their stories. And anybody new that they come across and they want to meet, they tend to default to telling their story. Like I remember, because I used to go around with a story, honestly. So
Yeah.
I know what it's like and I know what it feels like. But I remember doing my physical exercises one morning, and during the course of actually doing physical exercises, it was actually a rowing machine. I actually just got the brainwave, or whatever you want to call it. And the statement that caught in my head was, I'm not my story. Because I was one of those people that actually said, oh, this is what happened to me and this, that, and the other, and so on. And not so much woe was me, but I was trying to give a reason or an excuse or an explanation, if you know what I mean. And it was at that moment when I was doing the exercise, because I'm not my story. I don't have to carry my story around the whole time. And so that became the catalyst to say, actually, you know what? Just get on with life in some respects and forget about the story. Take the learnings and the influence from the story, but use it as a springboard.
And what's interesting about that, when you say that, is that that happened in a moment where also you were also, I'd like to point out that you were rowing and going nowhere. So that was probably your first problem. So those listeners who want to get physical exercise, you're jumping a boat where you actually go somewhere by the time you're finished. It's like the treadmill of life. But when you had that moment, do you think, and this is obviously where, the likes of growth in discomfort and all these other phrases that come to mind, is it that it's the familiar? So we have this idea in mind that, well, okay, yes, it's not nice, or, it could be anything. It's like, hi, I'm Andrew and I'm short. Hi, I'm Andrew and I had a terrible experience. Hi, I'm Andrew and I had whatever. We obviously all have these internals. But is it that people are, from your experience, afraid to let go of the very thing that has always been kind of comforting them? It's just like if someone said, well, why do you make fun of yourself like that? It's just something I've always done. Is it that because then they don't know what to replace it with?
I suppose it depends on the story that they're carrying around.
Yeah.
Like I know one person that she's a widow. She has been a widow for close to, I'd say, about 20 years now at this stage. And anybody new that she comes across, it's the first story that she comes out with.
Yeah.
So that's grief. So that's holding on to somebody that's passed away and still carrying the candle for them. So some people could say, oh, that's lovely in terms of, yeah, she really loved the person. Terrible that he died young and all. But on the flip side, you could argue that, which has she held her life back? And to observe, yeah, she held her life back. She didn't go on to pursue the things that she always talked about before in terms of different places that she would have gone to and different things and different activities that she would have done and so on. So that's that kind of story. There's other people that I'd come across and they would tell a story, but they get a lot of benefit from actually telling the story. So part of it is how would I say, when they're telling people, they get the empathy from the other people. They get the support from the other people. They get the consolation from other people. And unconsciously, they're actually retelling their story because that's what they want. They want the love from other people and to support and this, that, and the other. So they're actually replaying the story in order to get something in return. Unconsciously. I'm not saying they're doing it consciously, but the vast majority is unconscious.
So that's almost the emotional version of mindless scrolling. You're scrolling on TikTok or you're scrolling on whatever by virtue of getting that dopamine rush. So someone's almost getting that unconscious. They're obviously not setting out to do it, but I don't think anyone sets out to scroll online for an hour straight looking at cat videos. But the concept from the sounds of it could be quite similar. Like you have someone that says, I have something, and when I say it and someone gives me the head tilt or whatever it may be, I feel a certain way. Obviously, this is an internal mechanism. And then they continue to carry that out. But I find that fascinating, like you said, with the likes of a widow. And I think if I take a personal circumstance of someone, let's say myself, and I would use my father is dead longer than he was alive. So if I was to that was a big turning point for me last year, where it went from the 19 years to the 20. And if I take that introspective approach of, hi, my name's Andrew and such has happened or whatever else. But when you continue the story for longer than the person was in your life, it's not to discount that they were in your life or that, whatever it may be. But when you note that, like you said just there, you kind of go, well, okay, well, you're telling the same story about this person, like the widow who's happened with X, but you're talking about it for as long as you were married or less than, or more than you were married, as in like the person may be dead longer than you were actually married. And God love them. It must be an absolute challenging thing. I cannot imagine what it would be like. But then that story is the thing that it's the record that gets picked up automatically because there's the least dust on it and it just plays beautifully every time.
Yeah, but you can imagine that person being stuck.
Oh, hugely so. Yeah, if you have the same record, I mean, it's not an MP3 player. There's only so much room for memory and recall. It's not even the first, it's the old school gramophone. There's one record to choose from and nothing's going to change as soon as you play it. This is the thing I find challenging when you meet people. One of the fascinating things about conversation is you can really go in depth with people and you can find out that they've got a wonderful appetite for different areas or they've got insights or learnings from their own experiences. But I've also noticed that I could have conversations with people, and when you listen long enough, you realize that the same story is just being slotted in to the conversational deck.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, what is it you could do to shake that up? If you were to take an objective approach and say, when you meet someone that has this particular ism in some shape
Yeah.
or form, if you could have a blank canvas with no repercussions, what would you say to them?
Honestly, I'd love to shake them,
Okay. Okay.
but I can't. And that's the hardest thing. Because again, I do come across an awful lot of people that are stuck and they're telling themselves their own stories. So it's their own beliefs as well that they have. And their whole narrative that they tell in their mind is, and you know, because they're saying it. So
Mm.
it's not just, they're telling other people that whole narrative. And no matter how much you say or do to try and help them, they don't change. And they're the ones that I find really disheartening because they can have such an amazing life, but yet they're just stuck in where they're at. And they won't take action. The hardest thing for me is if they don't take action to change their circumstances. So you can encourage them, you can say all the positive things that you can possibly do to in order to try and enable them to change and so on. But for the individual, it has to get down to the individual. There's the old adage of, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink it. The person has to be ready. And at some point, something happens in their life that they hit the bottom of the barrel and then they make the decision, okay, now I'm going to do something about it. A lot of people will spiral to the end of that barrel before they have the impetus to actually do something about their life or their circumstances or whatever fate that they're actually in. It's very difficult for somebody else on the outside to get somebody to do something. That it has to be their decision. It has to be their desire to change.
Just there's eerie similarities with addiction when you say that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. That's actually quite profound. I find that a little bit upsetting in ways. When you think of, and obviously, like we've all got the aunt or uncle, it's usually the aunts, I don't know why, that want to fix you. Come on over here and I'll fix your jacket or I'll tell you this and whatever else. We've often had those conversations and I know I have tried to avoid them like the plague. But your natural thing is to want to help someone as a human being generally. And I think when you say that, it must be a difficult thing because you have to watch someone unfold a negative way in their own way. And no matter how many polite conversations you have, which then lead into tactful conversations, which then turn to frustration. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you. What is it you need from me? What can I do to change you? But the reality is someone has to get to the stage where they reach their bottom of a bottle, whether it be the equivalent of tablets, alcohol, whatever it may be. And it actually just so happens to be in the emotional sense.
Yeah. Or doom scrolling. But lesson that I had to learn years and years ago. Because again, when you want to help somebody and you're kind of pained to want to help the person, and you'll notice, Andrew, as well. But I had to make the decision years and years ago. So no, it's their life, and that's the life that they choose to live. So therefore, who am I to actually want them to live a different life? So I was trying to encourage somebody to live through my values, as opposed to allowing them to live through their values and the journey that they wanted to live. Now that's hard.
That's like having kids.
Yeah.
You're looking at them and you're like, no, don't go that way. And then they
Yeah.
fall and you resist the urge to tell them, firstly, I told you so, but secondly, to stop them falling again.
Yeah.
And
Then how did you learn then?
Yeah, but look, that's the cliche. Like it is the real, like you protect them from everything, they learn nothing. But when you think of people, what do you think is going to be I can't really see. This is one thing now, to be frank. Let's imagine the world we live in now. Instant gratification. You've got tech on demand. You've got AI to beat the band that outsources everything left, right, and center. You've got work from home versus sitting in the office. And you've got families that are probably really only coming to terms with, I would even say they probably haven't come to terms with yet the fallout of COVID, like the post-COVID revolution. Let's say family dynamics, social dynamics, identity. So with the stories people tell, what the hell are people supposed to do? Like I'm asking a slightly open-ended question, but you look at the markets and you look at things that are happening internationally. You've got tariffs, you've got the potential downturn every 15 minutes, and then it upturns, and then it's okay again. But the thing we can control is how I look at the things I can control myself, what I can learn, my attitude. That's really all you can do, though, isn't it? There's no point in getting overwhelmed.
No, absolutely not. So and this isn't about looking after yourself. You can still look after others, but you've got to be able to control the controllables. That's all you have control over. Just as I'm saying that, some people would be asleep to realizing that they're actually playing their story and that they're buying into the news, the media, and everything else being said, and as you know, the markets and so on, they can get sucked into actually just not, it's not so much about believing the narrative. I'm not saying that. It's just being sucked into that's the way of life, as opposed to standing back and saying, actually, you know, what do I want my life to be like? And a lot of people said that during COVID, in terms of, actually, you know what, I look at my life was okay before COVID. Now that I've had a bit of time off and doing things that I really love to do, how about I change how I'm going to live going forward post-COVID? And they took action to pursue that. A lot of people went back into their old ways of doing things pre-COVID, so nothing really changed from that side of things. But if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to change? So you've got to be able to constantly stepping back and looking at the narrative that you're telling yourself, and what is it that you want to improve? What is it that you want to change? And constantly reassessing that and constantly recreating the life that you do want. That nothing is, shouldn't really take anything as being permanent. So even if you decide, well, I'm going to build this career, I'm going to build this business, don't think of it as being permanent. I'm going to build this business, I'm going to see how it goes and see how I enjoy it. If it lasts for a few years, then great. If it doesn't, well then, great.
Great.
Yeah.
This is the funny thing that I think I've had a couple of revelations in the last number of months, and it's only by meeting people who have the things that I may have perceived I wanted that I thought, well, you know what? I'll take a little bit of that, like a buffet, but I like this bit because I like this a certain way. But I think with probably the one thing people look at nowadays, as they have historically, is that sense of permanence equals safety. So, you know, if you go to school and you look at the generational, so when my father finished school, that would have been a good thing. You finished school and that would have been considered the pinnacle. Then you go to college and that's that elusive thing out there that's never going to happen. Then college became the norm. It's like, oh, you can read and write and go to college. You're nothing special. That's your basic requirements. And then now we're at that upturn of, oh, you don't need college. You just need real life examples and know how to work AI and whatever else. But I think one of the threads throughout that is unraveling is people having to come around to permanence doesn't mean safety. It just means something that's permanent. But then that's an illusion because nothing is permanent. Literally nothing is permanent. Yeah. You know, property that was built 150 years ago has moved ever so slightly, whether a micromillimeter over the course of a century, it's still moving. So it's not permanent in the word as permanent means. But one thing that I'd be interested in knowing is, let's say, as a rough, totally back of the hand percentage or figure of the people you talk to, roughly what percentage would you see are kind of delving in? So almost like someone who says, I'm going to take up golf. They buy the golf clubs, they play once, and they never play again. What percentage would you see the people who either come to you or talk about what they think they want, and then they prefer to grab onto what they perceive as safe, but which is permanent? You know, I'm not going to go pursue this unknown. I'm going to stick to what I know.
It may be just because the circles I'm circling in, but I'm going to say 20% of the people, I'm going to use the ratio principle, 20% of the people just continue doing what they've always done.
Okay.
The 80%, but again, it's maybe just because of the circles that I'm moving in. 80% of the people they're constantly looking forward. Okay. And they know they have to improve. They know they have to change. They know, bottom line is, I suppose, at the core, they know in order to get the results that they want, it comes from within. They absolutely know that to the core. And the 20% are looking outside and hoping that circumstances will change.
Also, that kind of active versus passive. If I stay here long enough, a bus will come, versus I'm going to start walking and I'll eventually find a bus, or I'll eventually find the destination.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I'd say 80% of the people are active.
Which is promising. Like if I think of that now, and I think of the world we're in.
The reason why I put the caveat on is because they're the circles I choose not to navigate in protector circles for that exact reason.
That's the story you've told yourself as well, which is your version of.
Exactly.
I say the same thing. I have my quotas for coffees every month where I meet people, and I always caveat it with, when someone asks me, how do I introduce this? I want to meet interesting people. And if I meet someone who wants to moan about the weather and complain, that is going to drain me of energy, vitality, and vision. If I meet someone who fills the tank, that is also feeding the book that I'm filling with the stories I tell myself. What's interesting here is someone else could take the viewpoint that they meet people that are down in the dumps all the time, don't want to change, and maybe work for Dublin City Council. You never know. And they don't want to move beyond their jobs. But if someone was to take something away from today's conversation to wrap it up, for anyone that's missed the beginning of it, we're talking about the stories we tell ourselves. if you had someone's ear for 15 seconds, what would be one thing you get them to do to shake them up a little bit that would just maybe, you could say, scare them into assessing what that story is, or maybe taking an alternative view? What would you say?
I think it's going to be hard for them to accept. But what I would say to them is that you're in control of everything. You're in absolute control of everything in your life and how you perceive everything. Waiting for something to change or hoping that something is going to change, that's just a waste of time. But you've got to take action. But a lot of people won't want to hear that because it involves work.
And someone's going to turn the page and write their own story, and the other one's going to rip it up, throw it in the bin, and say, "I'll listen to this story, my own story instead."
Yeah, they're in their. I'm not saying it's not that they're in their comfort zone, but it is comfortable.
Oh yeah,
It's dopamine. It's the monkey part of the brain. It's the amygdala, and all it wants is just instant gratification. It just wants the glass of wine or the slice of cake or the bar of chocolate or doom scrolling, as you say, or watching Coronation Street, EastEnders, followed by Emmerdale. Jesus, I don't think I could stomach 5 minutes of watching EastEnders, because every time you might see a snippet of it, it's all about either somebody's been killed or somebody is just moaning and groaning the whole time in a bad way. I'm talking about moaning and whinging. Jesus, that's not entertainment.
it's a systemic thing though. And you're also like, when you think of the stories we tell ourselves, we are also what we consume. So when you think about what we do, but to finish off, it's that Van Morrison song, Comfortably Numb. I think a lot of people just literally don't want to step outside that numbness, whether they admit it or not. But the opportunity to open that book, grab a pen and start writing a different story can mean untold possibilities. And for one person, that is, they get out and start walking around the block. For another person, it's connecting with someone they never did. And for another person, it's a complete change of lifestyle, whatever that may mean to them. And I think it's probably an opportunity. Hopefully, if someone's listening to this, it makes an impact on them, their thought process, or if they know someone who's going through something, maybe it's worth trying them this, making them a little uncomfortable, put the kettle on, maybe they'll come around and have a chat with you, and you never know. And we'll come back to you next week with a different topic.
You never know.
And that's it for another episode of Beyond Just Business. If it gave you something to think about, or it helped you see things a little differently, we're delighted. But make sure you're following so you don't miss out on the next episode. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.